Hey booktubers, I'm here today to do a series review of the 50 Shades series by E.L. James. The three books in the series are 50 Shades of Grey, 50 Shades Darker, and 50 Shades Freed. I've already done a separate review video for the first book in the series, 50 Shades of Grey. I will leave a link in the drop down box. So primarily in this video I will be talking about the second and the third book. Also, right off the bat, let me just say there will be spoilers in this video, so if you've only read the first book or if you plan on reading the series, keep in mind I will be talking about things that happen in the second and the third book. So having said that, so the basic premise of these books is a adult erotica book or series about a man by the name of Christian Grey who is 27, very, very rich, very, very handsome, and he has a fetish for bondage. He meets this girl, Anastasia, who's 21, very young and naive, and they embark on this sort of crazy relationship. Now, even though I ended up really enjoying the first book, I did have some serious issues with it, primarily being there was a lot of repetition as far as the dialogue and situation goes. The character of Anastasia was written in an extremely bratty, childish way, and her just mind-bending mood swings were just really, really hard to handle in the first book. I'm happy to say that with Darker, the second book, it is a vast, vast improvement over the first book. A lot of the issues that I had, if not completely rectified, at least she improved, and there were less repetition. Anastasia, although throughout the entire series I still wanted to strangle her, for the most part, she was not nearly as annoying in the other two books. Well, at least in the second book. She kind of went back a little bit in the third book, but anyway. And I think the best aspect of the second book, Darker, which is hands down my favorite of the three books, was the fact that we got to see more of the character Christian. We got to find out more about his past when he was growing up and all of the problems that he had growing up that sort of led to the problems that he has in the present. And because, that was a big improvement in itself, because one of the things that kept me reading the first book was because I was so interested in the character of Christian, so it was nice to see the development of his character. Excuse me. And also E.L. James' writing style, vast improvement in the second book. You can definitely see that she was learning, and there were several scenes in the second book that were just really, really, really well done. One scene in particular, about halfway through, which everybody who's read the book and who's read the series probably will know what scene I'm talking about before I even describe it, but yeah, Christian is trying to, he's like desperate to get Anastasia to stay with him, and he ends up like falling to his knees, basically offering himself as a submissive to Anastasia, which is like the antithesis of his character, to try and prove how much he cares about her. And the whole scene was done in a really, really well done way, and which made it very affecting. In my opinion, I know this is probably a very unpopular opinion, I think that the story should have ended with 2 books, because I think that the ending, with the exception of the very, very last scene of the second book of Darker, was perfect. It could have just, we knew that Anastasia and Christian had their version of a happy ever after. I think, my one problem with Darker was the very, very last scene, which felt very much tacked on to sort of give you a reason to have a third book. And sort of, with as much as I loved Darker, Freed, on the other hand, I had more issues with that book as well, kind of like with the first book. I felt a lot of the plot elements in Freed was really unnecessary. It was the longest book, which didn't make much sense to me. I think there was a lot of angst and unnecessary drama and tension, and while it kept me reading, just like the first book, Yeah, it was definitely not as enjoyable as the first two books, and the last third of the book really, really annoyed me. Um, Everything up to the point where Anastasia finds out she's pregnant, and Christian's reaction to it, the fact that that ends up bringing back Mrs. Robinson into the story, and the whole thing with Jack Hyde. It was annoying, and it was just way too much angst, and just, like I said, needless drama, and it just wasn't needed, it just, that part of the book sort of kind of lost it for me. And I have to point this out. I was talking about this to a friend of mine who read the series, and she agrees with me. There's been a lot of talk about how this series is very misogynistic, it's very demeaning to women, it promotes domestic violence and everything like that. But if you've actually read the series, then Anastasia ends up hurting Christian way more than he ever even came close to hurting her, physically or emotionally. The very end, like the second and the third book, up until the last third of the third book, Anastasia spends the entire time trying to convince Christian that she loves him, she accepts him, she's not going to run for the hills, she's going to stay with him, and they're going to have a life together. And she spends all this time trying to convince him of this. And then at the very end, what does she end up doing? She tells him that she's leaving him because she can't handle his lifestyle. And yes, it was like a convoluted sort of plot element because of the drama and like the whole thing with Jack Hyde, which I could sit here for like an hour and go off about how that whole section of the book was just completely unnecessary. But yeah, I understand that, it was just a temporary thing, but it just, after everything else that they've gone through, after all the times, she flip-flopped on whether or not she wanted to be with him, to like finally get to the point where he's secure in the fact that she's going to stay with him, and then she turns around and just like breaks his heart again. Whether or not, it was for real or not, just the fact that she did it again. It's like, my God, this was proof of why she's such an annoying character. She did get better, like I said, in the second book, but then she kind of fell back into her old, annoying, irritating, bratty, childish habits in the third book. So, yeah. But, overall, it was an enjoyable series, but I did have issues with the first and the third book. In my opinion, the second book was about as close to perfect as you can get in this kind of a book. So let me know what you think. Have you read the series? Do you plan on reading the series? If you have read the series, what do you think? Do you think the third book was necessary? Do you think that it was sort of just added on because people liked reading about Christian and Anastasia so much? Because even like the third book, as far as the sex scenes go, there wasn't anything new, and she even started like cutting out the sex scenes. And I'm like, that was half the fun, was reading how many different possible ways that they could have sex. But yeah, there wasn't even that many of them. Although I will say that the beginning part of the book, the ones that were there were good. Yeah. But yeah, so give me your opinion on the series, and let's have a discussion. Everybody seems to be talking about this book. I was telling my friend that I had not one, but 5 people at work asked to borrow the first book from me. So just all of a sudden it's like everywhere. Everybody wants to read it. Everybody's reading it. So tell me what you think. And that's pretty much it for this time. And I will talk to you guys later. Leave me some love. And as always, happy reading.